Hey, how's it going? My name is Hall Squires. This is my presentation on my experiences with facilities for PER 670. Starting with my best experience, this might be a little bit of a hot take. There's a lot out there against the Oakland Coliseum, but my best experience is going to be with the Oakland Coliseum. It was initially built, to pressure, um, should be built from pressure from business leaders, from political leaders. Oakland really wanted to separate itself from San Francisco and from the broader Bay Area as its own metropolis, as its own city. And so we see in 1960, there starts to be a lot of the pressure there. In 1966, we see the Oakland Raiders, at that time, a part of the AFL transitioning into the NFL, would occupy this stadium first. Shortly thereafter, in 68, the Kansas City Royals would move, or excuse me, Kansas City Athletics would move from Kansas City to Oakland. And the Oakland Coliseum would house both the Raiders and the Athletics for some time. The Raiders would eventually move to LA, but then come back in 96, and we would see the stadium expanded then and would continue to house both of them until the 2010s. To kind of get into the features and criticisms, just to kind of start with the positives here, and I think when we talk about multi-purpose facilities and multi-purpose, stadiums, I think the Oakland Coliseum is kind of the one that sticks out the most to me, at least. There's many football games that you could go back and look at for the Oakland Raiders in which the dirt from the Oakland Athletics game is still there. And I think that's really cool. I think the symbolism there is really fun. And it's an affordable place. It was really easy to get in and out of. We talk about travel. There's a BART station right there. Parking was extremely affordable, extremely easy. And it's just historic, I think it's a stadium that's been around, like I said, since the 60s. You looked around and you could tell that it had some history, but it never came off to me as run down. It came off to me as just kind of this symbol of Oakland. This thing that was really, really emblematic of the city. And the fans reflected that. They had a lot of pride in the stadium, and I always thought that was really cool. It was just awesome to be around. Now, to kind of get into the criticisms, a lot of people would say that it was poorly maintained. I was fortunate that most my time in California was in the late 2000s. I think this is kind of before when a lot of those criticisms started to arise. Um, People point out that it is poorly maintained. I kind of have two quotes here from dueling New York Times authors. Draper here, he calls it a bland, charmless concrete monstrosity. There's a lot of concrete there, but um, you know, I think it's kind of perspective here, right? It's subjective and everything. Um, Jack Nikes, another New York Times author, calls it cheap, gritty, fun, and says that if parks were the equivalent of classic pubs, the Coliseum is baseball's last dive bar. Obviously, as a 7, 8, 9, 10 year old, I wasn't necessarily thinking of it as a dive bar, but it did always strike me as kind of like beautiful and historic, and in a way that um, maybe not contemporarily seen as aesthetic. Kind of getting into my worst experience, this is going to be Ben Hill Griffin Stadium at the University of Florida. I went to a college football game about 2, 3 years ago, and did not enjoy it. It's a very old stadium, opened in 1930 originally. You can see a lot of expansion since then. It's huge. There's no denying that. Largest stadium in Florida, 12th in the country, and 21st largest in the world. Just to kind of give some additional compliments to the stadium. It is huge. It's very unique. And I think a lot of fans take pride in that. There's a lot of tradition. But at the end of the day, I think it becomes so expansive that you could pretty easily make the argument that it's overcrowded. It is still expensive. I found it extremely difficult to maneuver both around the concourse as well as in and out of the stadium. Parking was a nightmare. There's not a lot of bus support. I just found it very difficult to get in and out of. That could have been a one-off experience. Now, the thing that I think was probably the biggest criticism that I have is kind of on this structure, whether actually goes together. Um, you hear a lot of talk about stadiums and they're being bowl shaped, but I've never quite seen a stadium like this. Even though a lot of stadiums are quote unquote bowl shaped, they kind of shape out. And so it's not quite so vertical as the stadium goes up. But that's not the case here with Ben Hill Griffin Stadium. It is extremely steep. It very much does feel like a bowl in its structure. And in the research that I found, a lot of that was intentional. You have a field that's actually below sea level. It's not just lower than the stadium, but it's below sea level. And that really amplifies the weather that is existing in Gainesville, Florida. And for those of you that don't know, it's extremely hot, it's extremely humid. And so that creates some conditions inside this very vertical bowl shape that amplifies that heat, that amplifies that humidity, and it's very hot, it's very muggy, and in my opinion, it's not fun to be in. This is actually just a fun fact. A big reason why we see Gatorade gets invented by the Florida Gators to help deal with these on-field conditions in Ben Hill Griffin Stadium. I also put fandom here on both sides just because it's kind of how you view that. I think the fandom's great. I think that in ways it's super passionate and that's fun to be around. But at times, anybody who's been around SEC fans know that it can kind of get out of hand too. What should be done about massive stadium spending? This is a question that, is really hard to kind of answer in a brief way. But I just kind of want to throw a couple of things at you. This picture is kind of be my example that I'm working off on. It's the most recent example. The Chiefs are moving, I think it's like 20, 30 miles from Kansas City, Missouri to Kansas City, Kansas. Why are they doing this? Well, the short answer here is tax incentives. And it's not just Kansas City. This is just the most recent example. But Kansas City and the Chiefs, I should say that the Chiefs are receiving $4 billion. That's funded by the state of Kansas for this new stadium. $4 billion is an absurd amount of money. How is the state paying this $4 billion? Well, it's paid for by star bonds. These are bonds that are paid by sales tax. So, in other words, we have sales tax, we have taxpayer dollars that are going towards $4 billion in funding for this Chiefs stadium. All right, the Chiefs, again, though, like I said, not the only one. Um, we see as of 2022, this is from NPR, 79% of the 126 stadiums across NFL, NHL, NBA, MLB, and MLS. Across those leagues, 79% of stadiums are fully exempt from property tax. The Chiefs will be as well. Um, and so, what does that mean? That means that according to Andrew Zimbalist, he's an economist. He said that he found that 73% of NFL stadium funding for building and operating costs are paid for by the public. Again, just to say that again, 73% of the building and operating costs are going to be paid for by the public. And so we have just an unreal amount of money going into these stadiums. And not only do we have an unreal amount of money going into these stadiums, but a lot of that is being paid for by the public with public funds. That's obviously pretty problematic to me. Those are funds that are not going towards the people and towards social services to improve their lives and to improve the local community. Instead, they're going to multi-million, if not billion-dollar owners and providing tax breaks for them. So my suggestion is that, things need to change. Tax incentives, the elimination of them is probably not a realistic thing. There's too much political motive there. Nobody wants to be the governor that saw an NFL team leave because another political leader would give them a tax incentive. So that's probably not realistic, but it is very realistic to expect that these NFL teams step up and start to do more for the local community. And the fact that they're getting, I mean, just absurd amount of money in tax incentives and tax breaks. Investment in infrastructure and bridges has a multiplier effect every day. Spending on stadiums, on the other hand, has a multiplier effect 10 to 12 days a year, right? This is not helping the community every single day. So what do we need to do? My suggestion here is social programs, local investment. These teams need to be giving money back to their community. They can do that through youth development. They can bring the community into the stadium. We can be prioritizing multi-use stadiums that really incorporate the local community to them. But what we can't do is just continue allowing these already extremely wealthy franchises and owners to continue profiting off of tax incentives and tax breaks while not having to help their community at all. That's it for my presentation. Thanks so much.